ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ। ਇੰਡੀਆ ਪਲੱਸ USA ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਅਮਨਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਕੌਰ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੀ ਹਾਂ। ਕੱਲ ਤੋਂ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਹੇਮਕੁੰਟ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੀ ਯਾਤਰਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ। ਜੈਲੰਸਕੇ ਨੇ ਲਾਈਵ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ ਕਾਨਫਰੰਸ ਨੂੰ ਸੰਬੋਧਨ ਕੀਤਾ। ਆਪ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਫਾਇਰ ਰੋਬੋਟ ਦਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਦਘਾਟਨ। UNSC ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਈ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਸ਼ੇਸ਼ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ। ਆਓ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਵੱਡੀ ਖਬਰ ਤੋਂ। ਕੱਲ ਤੋਂ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਹੇਮਕੁੰਟ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੀ ਯਾਤਰਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ। ਕੱਲ ਤੋਂ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਹੇਮਕੁੰਟ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੀ ਯਾਤਰਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਬਰਫ਼ ਹਟਾ ਕੇ ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਲਈ ਰਸਤਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਸਾਫ਼। ਜੈਲੰਸਕੇ ਨੇ ਲਾਈਵ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ ਕਾਨਫਰੰਸ ਨੂੰ ਸੰਬੋਧਨ ਕੀਤਾ। ਅਸੀਂ ਭਾਈਵਾਲ ਦੇਸ਼ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਪੱਖੀ ਸਮਝੌਤੇ ਤੇ ਦਸਤਖਤ ਕਰਨ ਅਤੇ ਇਸ ਵਿਧੀ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਸੱਦਾ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਜਿਸ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਰੂਸ ਦੀਆਂ ਕਾਰਵਾਈਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਪੀੜਤ ਹਰ ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਰੇ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਅਤੇ ਮੁਆਵਜ਼ਾ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਤ ਕਰਨ ਦੇ ਯੋਗ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਅਸੀਂ ਇਨਕਾਰਨਾਮੇ ਦੇ ਤਹਿਤ ਹਿੱਸੇਦਾਰ ਦੇਸ਼ ਦੇ ਅਧਿਕਾਰ ਖੇਤਰ ਦੇ ਅਧੀਨ ਰੂਸੀ ਫੰਡ ਅਤੇ ਸੰਪत्ति ਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਬਤ ਜਾਂ ਫ੍ਰੀਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ।
Подякувати перш за все вам за те, що ви приїхали, вашій команді за цей візит. Я вдячний керівництву Ірландії, і вам, і парламенту, і голові держави за те, що ви нас підтримуєте в цей складний момент, підтримуєте наш суверенітет, територіальну цілісність. Для нас ваш візит – це сигнал, перш за все, для людей. І те, про що ви сказали, яка сміливість наших людей, і вона вражає весь світ. І тому для наших людей, для нашого народу це є сигнал, і це є пряма підтримка Ірландії, України і нашого суспільства. Для нас дуже важливо, щоб Європа залишалась об'єднаною, тому що в цьому об'єднанні, в цьому є міцність і нашої держави, як ми продемонстрували, коли наш народ об'єднався проти російської агресії. Так само і об'єднаність з боку Європи важлива не тільки в підтримці України, а в шагах наступу на Росію, саме санкційної політики, перш за все.
Take the opportunity to salute you, salute your parliament and the determination that you're showing to the world in the preservation. It's a demonstration to the world of what patriotism means to the sanctions regime. Totally committed to the sixth, attempting to maintain European unity within the community. There continues to be a job of work to do.
Not more.
Maybe even no more. No, well, I don't think so. That's not what. But that we're bringing back to Dublin is, yes, let us be advocates for your great country.
Thank you, Enrique. There was great reluctance by some countries to bring about in relation to the gas. We know that is ultimately the issue. In relation to the issue of the EU, we will go back.
ਆਪ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਫਾਇਰ ਰੋਬੋਟ ਦਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਦਘਾਟਨ। ਸਾਡੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਨੇ ਰਿਮੋਟ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਫਾਇਰ ਫਿਟਿੰਗ ਮਸ਼ੀਨਾਂ ਖਰੀਦੀਆਂ ਹਨ। ਸਾਡਾ ਬਹਾਦਰ ਫਾਇਰਮੈਨ ਹੁਣ 100 ਮੀਟਰ ਦੀ ਵੱਧ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਅਤ ਦੂਰੀ ਤੋਂ ਅੱਗ ਨਾਲ ਲੜ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਇਹ ਜਮਾਂਦਰੂ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਨੂੰ ਘਟਾਉਣ ਅਤੇ ਕੀਮਤੀ ਜਾਨਾਂ ਬਚਾਉਣ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਦਦ ਕਰੇਗਾ।
के लिए अपनी जान जोखिम में डाल देते हैं, ऐसे में ज़रूरी है कि हम उनकी सुरक्षा का ख्याल रखें।
हमारे पास रिमोट कंट्रोल फायर फाइटिंग मशीन है जो कि रिमोट के द्वारा ऑपरेट होती है, जिसका ऑपरेटर दूर खड़ा होकर फायर फाइटिंग कर सकता है। और ये रिमोट ऑपरेट जो है 30 मीटर दूर से इसको ऑपरेट किया जाता है और इसकी जो जेट वगैरह है वो 45 to 60 मीटर तक जाता है।
इसमें कूलिंग कैपेसिटी भी है, इसमें पुशिंग कैपेसिटी भी है और इसमें फायर फाइटिंग रोटेट करके 360 डिग्री एंगल पे चारों तरफ कर सकते हैं। इसमें जेट और स्प्रे दोनों साथ साथ चलते हैं।
इन रोबोट्स की मदद से हमारे जाबाज सिपाही सुरक्षित दूरी से लगभग 100 मीटर की दूरी से रिमोट के द्वारा रोबोट से का संचालन कर सकते हैं और जटिल परिस्थितियों में आग को काबू में पाने की पूरी कोशिश कर सकते हैं। इससे हमारे जाबाज सिपाहियों की जान बचाई जा सकती है।
इसके थ्रू हम 3 चीज़ें प्राप्त कर सकते हैं। एक तो सॉलिड जेट मिलता है, दूसरा वाटर मिस्ट सिस्टम और तीसरा फोम ले सकते हैं। इसको जो है एक कैरियर व्हीकल के थ्रू हम फायर सीन पर ले जाते हैं और इसका जो है फायर फाइटिंग करते हैं।
पहले जहां हम जाने से थोड़ा सा घबराते थे, अब वहां पे बेहिचक अंदर जा सकते हैं। जहां पे एक्सप्लोजन होने का डर होता था या जहां हमें लगता था कि हमारे जवानों की हानि हो सकती है, कुछ हो सकता है, वहां पे इस फायर फाइटिंग मशीन का बड़े अच्छे से सदुपयोग किया जा सकता है।
ये अपने आप में देश के अंदर पहला और अनूठा एक्सपेरिमेंट है जो केजरीवाल सरकार ने किया है।
मैं उसके लिए दिल्ली फायर सर्विस की तरफ से दिल्ली सरकार को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूँ।
यूएनएससी ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਈ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਸ਼ੇਸ਼ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ। ਜਨਰਲ ਅਸੈਂਬਲੀ ਦੇ ਨੇਤਾ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਮਾਜਿਕ ਏਕਤਾ ਨੂੰ ਉਤਸ਼ਾਹਿਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਪ੍ਰਵਾਸ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਅਤ, ਵਧੇਰੇ ਵਿਵਸਥਿਤ ਅਤੇ ਵਧੇਰੇ ਨਿਯਮਿਤ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ।
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this press briefing. It's taking place on the last day of the International Migration Review Forum. We're very pleased today to have with us the President of the 76th session of the General Assembly, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, and Mr. Antonio Vitorino, who is the Director General of the International Organization for Migration, IOM. He is also the coordinator for the UN Network on Migration. They both will present short opening remarks, and then we'll take your questions. If I may, President Shahid, you have the microphone, sir.
Thank you very much, Paulina. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for coming for this press briefing. It's been a while since I had the opportunity of meeting you. So good to see all of you. We are just meeting weeks after the World Press Freedom Day. And as I said that day, attacks against journalists and media workers are increasing. I want to take this opportunity once again to strongly condemn the shootings that killed Ms. Shireen Abu Akhlaq and injured Mr. Ali Al-Samoudi. Everyone, everywhere, has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive and impart information and ideas through any media regardless of frontiers. Media freedom must not be compromised. It is the cornerstone of any robust democracy. My dear friends, let me turn to the subject at hand today. This week I'm chairing the first International Migration Review Forum being held under the auspices of the General Assembly. My sincere thanks to Director General of IM, Antonio Vitorino, who joins me today in this special briefing. I will give a big picture of the overview of IMRF and then request my dear friend and the Director General to give the details and the finer details. We meet nearly 4 years since the adoption of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration, the first ever UN global agreement on a common approach to international migration in all its dimensions. Now, what has transpired in the last 4 years? By the last count, there are roughly over 281 million international migrants in the world, or 3.6% of the global population. Many migrants leave their countries of origin for work, whereas others are forced due to violence, poverty, environmental degradation, and climate change, and many other reasons. Regardless of their circumstances, the international community has a responsibility to ensure that human rights of everyone involved is respected and protected. On Monday, I chaired an informal interactive multi-stakeholder hearing. Approximately 250 stakeholders and 22 panelists from all the groups of stakeholders and regions participated. More than 80 stakeholders intervened from the floor. They were among the almost 600 stakeholders who registered to take part in the IMRF. The OPGA, with the Secretariat, has worked to make sure that we make the IMRF as inclusive as possible, reflecting the whole of the society approach, which is a cornerstone of the Global Compact. This hearing was important in that we heard from those who work on the ground, who are affected directly. As one of the participants said at the hearing, and we heard numerous times in the opening of the plenary yesterday, nothing about us without us. Civil society representative Mr. Colin Raja presented a summary of the hearing during yesterday's plenary opening. Some of the key takeaways included the emphasis on eliminating racism and multiple forms of discrimination, promoting access to justice to migrant workers and others, ending immigration detention, ensuring access to healthcare and services regardless of status, impacts of climate change on migration. The International Migration Review Forum began on Tuesday, 17th May, with the roundtables followed by the policy debate on Wednesday afternoon. We have over 50 panelists from all regions for the hearing, roundtables, and policy debate. All the roundtables and the policy debate reflect the whole of the society, whole of government approach that is intrinsic in the Global Compact on Migration. We heard voices of national governments, mayors, migrants, private sector, academia, trade unions, UN entities, civil society, and many others. The roundtables were designed to review the progress of 23 objectives of the Global Compact and the policy debate, looking ahead to new and emerging challenges. And yesterday we began the two-day general debate. We have had a total of 124 registrations, including one head of state of government, 21 ministers, 26 vice ministers, and 21 high-level authorities. I would like to note that this high number of ministers and high-level participation is very encouraging, not only signaling the focus and importance given to the issue by member states, but also showing the increasing return to normalcy following 2 years of virtual engagements. What is coming out of the IMRF? What we can see clearly is that there is agreement that the international community must act now to support migrants and their host communities. The progress declaration will go before the membership of the forum this afternoon, and it reflects a very good, a broad consensus among member states. I want to extend my sincere thanks to the co-facilitators of the intergovernmental consultations, Ambassador Rabab Fatima, the permanent representative of Bangladesh, and Ambassador Olivia Maes, permanent representative of Luxembourg. Since 8th February, the co-facilitators have first and foremost made certain that the process to negotiate the progress declaration was extensive, open, transparent, and inclusive. In addition, all week we have seen national pledges stream in from governments that are committing to upholding human rights, especially when it comes to detentions and the detention of children. There have been over 200 pledges announced this week. I want to again express my appreciation to member states who have examined their national policies and come up with solutions to fill the gaps, to more holistically assist migrants and their host communities. The COVID-19 pandemic brought challenges for migrants. They faced more difficulties accessing diagnostics, treatment, and vaccines. Compounding this, they were especially vulnerable to discrimination, job loss, and a lack of access to social safety. The pandemic also demonstrated the integral role migrants play in our communities, including through life-saving work in healthcare and in supporting critical supply chains. And as we go forward in the post-COVID-19 world, we need to rethink the sort of world that we want. We have to work towards making migration safer, more orderly, and more regular, while promoting social cohesion. Given that it has been a few months since we spoke, let me also take this opportunity to update you on a few key initiatives of the Presidency of Hope. First, the COVID situation. Although the rates of infection fluctuates in New York, the UN headquarters is back and fully in person. I had supported reopening, as you would know, and I'm grateful to the efforts of the Secretariat for having made it possible. The first major in-person event was the 2022 parliamentary hearing in February, a joint initiative of the IPU and my office. The event really amplified the global conversation here at the United Nations and in capitals around the world about sustainable development amid pandemic. Earlier this month, I held a high-level event on rebooting tourism. This was the first time that the thematic debate of the General Assembly was convened on the topic of tourism. We organized it in close collaboration with UN World Tourism Organization and the UN partners. The message that emerged was that now it is the time to transform the sector and to make it sustainable and resilient along the value chain. And on that note, let me update you briefly about some of my travels as well. I just returned this past week from Africa, where I traveled to Côte d'Ivoire and Angola. I took part in the 15th session of the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification at the invitation of the government of Côte d'Ivoire. It was a pleasure to meet President Alassane Ouattara and discuss with him some of the successful initiatives to help people impacted by climate change, especially women. I continued my trip to Angola. I'm the first president of the General Assembly to visit Angola. While there, I visited a project to transfer water from Cunene River to several villages. The project is one of several that aim to combat the country's drought. In Angola, it was a great pleasure to speak with UN country teams and see how UN agencies are working on the ground, IOM among them, to deliver to the people most in need. This week, I'm traveling again. I will be in Thailand for the upcoming 78th session of the Economic and Social Council for Asia, as it marks its 75th anniversary. I will then travel to Bali for the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. I know many of you here today covered the Global Assessment Report, the GAR 2022, which the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction released ahead of this global platform. My trip to Bali will focus on what we, the international community, can do to prepare member states for this possibility and stop the spiral of disasters. From there, I will travel to Brunei, where my official visit will focus on sustainable COVID recovery. In terms of news here in New York, I had the privilege inaugurate the refurbished lactation rooms here at the United Nations headquarters. This was a project that I promised to do on my first day. I was honored that the governments of El Salvador and New Zealand shared my passion for this project and took it on as well. The First Lady of El Salvador was here to inaugurate these rooms with me. Along with the Secretariat, we were able to make it a reality and create safe, dignified spaces for families to nourish their children. Before concluding, let me also mention to you that later today, I will be issuing a presidential letter to member states, forwarding with the letter the summaries of the 5 consultations rounds that I have held with member states on the OCA, our common agenda. The letter is intended to convey the summaries together with a required action to be taken, which would be seen as a roadmap for implementation of the OCA. I wish to thank member states for the excellent cooperation that they have given to me in making sure that the process of implementing the OCA is expedited. As you would know, the OCA is a direct product of the 75th declaration adopted by consensus by the heads of state, heads of government of the United Nations. So it is imperative that we need to begin the process of implementation of OCA quickly. That desire I felt from the member states, the urgency that the member states wanted in implementation. And I am honored and privileged to lead this process, and I'm delighted that today I will be issuing this letter, marking the beginning of the implementation phase of our common agenda. Let me stop here and turn to my friend Antonio Vittori.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, and good afternoon. I would like to start by thanking you, Mr. President, for your leadership as well as your team in bringing us together here in New York to the first ever International Migration Review Forum, which is about to be concluded today in the afternoon. And I think that, as you have mentioned, the first issue that should be emphasized is the intense participation of member states and quite clear that migration is no longer a marginal issue. It is fully enshrined in the UN agenda. And from the debates that we have heard during this week, it is quite clear that there is no capacity to address the challenges but also the opportunities of migration out of cooperation. International cooperation, multilateral cooperation, as we do it here in the United Nations. You know, we use lots of jargon in the UN, and we say that the Global Compact on Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration has a 360-degree view. What does this mean? This means that the Global Compact addresses the challenges and the opportunities of migration for countries of origin, for countries of transit, and for countries of destination. But all are together in the concern that migrants need to be put at the center of the policies on migration, respecting their fundamental human rights, guaranteeing the protection particularly of those most vulnerable, women and girls, and at the same time emphasizing that migrants are crucial in the social economic fabric of all our societies. And that has been very evident in the pandemic, when migrants were on the front line in guaranteeing that the cities, the countries could go on working in spite of the virus. And now we expect from the international community that the role of migrants will also be recognized as key tools in the social economic recovery after the pandemic. It's not a surprise to you, I'm sure, that key points that have been emphasized are precisely the one focusing on the need to guarantee regular pathways for migration. It's necessary and complementary to the fight against trafficking and smuggling of migrants, and that's the only way to respect the human dignity of all migrants, as well as access to services, access to health care, access to education. And all member states have recognized that those are fundamental human rights for migrants, irrespective of their legal status. Now, I think that we are confronted with some challenges. To be honest, the progress since Marrakesh has been registered in all areas, but the progress has been uneven. Some areas have achieved better progress than others. And so the IMRF has also identified what are those areas where there is a need for an extra push to make the vision of the Global Compact reality. I'm referring, as the President of the General Assembly has already said, respect for human rights, access to basic services, building alternatives to detention of migrants, and above all, I would emphasize saving lives of migrants. The number of migrants that died since the Marrakesh, 15,000 people died in dangerous and perilous migratory trajectories. So, when we come to the end, we will have a progress declaration that is balanced, that is comprehensive, that gives us the guidelines of our action in the next 4 years. And as you know, as in English is said, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Well, the reality is that this first bite of the pudding proved the value of the Global Compact. Here we are for the next 4 years to make it each day different, better, thinking above all of the millions of lives of migrants that depend on international protection, international cooperation. Thank you so much, Mr. President.
So much, Director General, President. We'll open it up for questions right now. The first question, of course, will go to Edie and then to Edward.
Thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. First, a housekeeping issue. Could you make sure that we are sent a copy of this declaration today so that we can write about it in a timely fashion? Secondly, you've talked about the proof of the pudding is in the eating. What needs to be done and how are you going to do it to ensure the implementation of this document, particularly on the issues that you stressed? Safe migration, respect for human rights, and basically saving lives.
Well, yes, I hope we will be able to distribute the Progress Declaration as soon as it is adopted. It's foreseen for 5:00 p.m., so I hope there will be no as soon as it is endorsed by the member states in the forum. In terms of what are the practicalities of the implementation, we believe that there is a need to scale up search and rescue operations, particularly to those migrants who go through the sea, through the desert, and through the jungle. And we have a number of hotspots. We know where the problems are. It's the Gulf of Aden, it's the central Mediterranean, it's definitely the Darien Gap jungle in Central America and South America, and we encourage member states to speed up and scale up their capacity of search and rescue. Secondly, we need to be more effective in opening regular pathways for migration. That's the real alternative to letting migrants be prone to traffickers and smugglers. Because trafficking and smuggling is the most obnoxious attempt against the fundamental rights of migrants. And thirdly, yes, we need to take into consideration the vulnerable population. All migrants are moving in vulnerable conditions, but some are more vulnerable than others. I'm speaking about women, I'm speaking about girls, and we have seen that during the pandemic. You should not have any illusion. The pandemic did not stop migration. In spite of the closure of the borders, of the lockdowns, migration went on. People went on moving. But what we have seen is that women and girls have been particularly prone to abuses, gender-based violence, rapes. And in those conditions, we think that member states, all of them, countries of origin, transit and destination, have a shared responsibility to protect and provide the support and the services that are needed for the most vulnerable migrants. So there you have 3 priorities that we consider we should focus. And how can we do that? Putting pressure on the member states, advocating for values and principles, and counting on the mobilization of the migrants themselves.
Go ahead, and if I could ask all journalists to please introduce themselves as well.
Hi, this is De Zhishu from China Central Television. I have 2 questions. First one is a specific question for Mr. Vitorino. Recently, a spokesperson from the Rwanda government said they expect a first group of 50 asylum seekers from the UK arrive in their country. And we know this is a highly controversial deal between UK and Rwanda. And UNHCR argued that this is a breach of international law and it's contrary to the spirit of Refugee Convention. I just want to ask your thoughts on this. Do you think this is also against the global compact of migration. And my second question is for Mr. Shahid. We know over the years, UN did a lot of jobs here, and but more and more people feel like the UN is unable to act in some key issues like climate change, like, let's say, Ukraine conflict. As the president of the General Assembly, what do you think the body of General Assembly should do or could do to put UN in the core or the pillar of the multilateralism? Thank you.
Yes, I can go first because I will be very brief. The Global Compact on Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration focus on migration. It does not include refugees, neither asylum seekers. That is clearly the mandate of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And in my capacity of coordinator of the UN Migration Network and of the Director General of International Organization for Migration, the first thing I have to do is to fully respect the mandate of my colleague, Filippo Grandi. So if he has stated that, we are fully behind him, but that's his responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The basic question that we ask here, the 1.8 billion youth around the world ask themselves, and the question on our mind is, has the UN failed? 76 years into history, has the UN failed? To answer that, I think we have to also contemplate the options. What if not? What if the UN was not there? I remember speaking at the late Secretary Madeleine Albright's memorial day before yesterday. And just to quote from her, she said, if there was no UN, what? And it was her thinking that we should invent it. That is the option. Because multilateralism is the only way forward. The platform which brings the entire world community together is the only way forward. How much amount of work we do depends on our commitments. But then the United Nations provides that forum for us to come together. And there's no other option than, no other better option than this forum for that. The challenges that we are facing every day showcases the importance of the United Nations. Be it climate change, be it COVID pandemic, be it threats to international peace and security. Now, when we look at the COVID pandemic, the message that came through very loud and clear is that no one is safe until everyone is safe. Vaccination, treatment, everything. Well, the virus wasn't discriminating against rich or poor, developed or developing, north or south. There was no discrimination. It just kept on attacking every one of us. And unless all of us were safe, no one is safe. The same message we are receiving loud and clear on climate change. But there was a time when the general thinking was that, okay, the ice caps will melt, the sea level will rise, the small states will go underwater. There is larger land masses where these small communities can move on and they will be safe there. But this was the 80s and the 90s. But what the message that we are getting now is that while sea level is creeping up on small countries like mine, the Maldives, it's not stopping there. We are seeing increasing storms. The storms are raging, flooding is increasing, forest fires are everywhere, the rivers are drying up, desert is creeping up on us. So it's not only one nation, it's not only one person, everyone. And then now we have a war in Europe.
ਇਹ ਸਨ ਅੱਜ ਦੀਆਂ ਮੁੱਖ ਖਬਰਾਂ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਅਮਨਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਨੂੰ ਦਿਓ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ ਤੇ ਹੋਰ ਵਧੇਰੇ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਜੁੜੇ ਰਹੋ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਪਲੱਸ USA ਦੇ ਨਾਲ। ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।